The long-standing conflict between the Apache and the Comanche stands as one of the most brutal and enduring rivalries in Native American history. Defined by deep animosity, both tribes engaged in what Spanish and Mexican observers grimly referred to as a war of extermination. By the late 1500s, the eastern Apache had established dominance over the southern Great Plains. Skillfully, their buffalo hunting lifestyle with semi-agricultural practices, this unique combination allowed them to cultivate a stable and abundant food supply, contributing to their security. In stark contrast, the Comanche found themselves marginalized and living on the fringes, often overshadowed by more powerful tribes like the Apache. Forced into rugged mountain terrains, they developed a culture characterized by resilience and a thirst for vengeance. However, during the mid-1600s, a single transformative event, indirectly set in motion by the Apache, would elevate them to become one of the most formidable Native American powers in history. The impetus for this transformation began in the 1500s with the Spanish expansion into Mexico, which pushed northward into present-day New Mexico by around 1600. Armed with advanced weaponry, armor, and horses, the Spanish quickly subjugated many Pueblo communities. Yet, the Apache remained resolute, frequently raiding Spanish settlements to steal horses and armaments, while carefully observing Spanish horsemanship from a distance. By the 1650s, they had begun to replicate these mounted raids. The Spanish settlements, including Taos and Santa Fe, existed under constant threat from Apache incursions. The Pueblo peoples, having become subjects of Spanish authority, anticipated protection that never materialized. The Apache struck decisively, killing those who resisted, seizing livestock, and vanishing without a trace. By 1680, the Pueblo, frustrated by Spanish neglect, revolted and expelled the Spanish, causing over 1,000 horses to escape into the wilderness. These escaped Mustangs, well suited to the Great Plains, began to spread rapidly across tribal networks in what has come to be known as the Great Horse Dispersal. As Spanish forces regained their lost territories, Apache raids surged once again. However, in 1706, these aggressive actions abruptly ceased. Reports from the Spanish described Apache groups fleeing in panic, spurred by rumors of mounted invaders from the north, powerful and swift. Soon, entire Apache bands disappeared without explanation. The Spanish were ignorant of the new threat that was decimating their former tormentors. The responsible parties were the Utes, who referred to these northern warriors as Comanche, meaning those who are against me. Always, the Spanish simplistically dubbed them the Comanche. Ironically, the Apache had unwittingly orchestrated their own downfall. Their raids had liberated Spanish horses, which in turn galvanized the Comanche into the most formidable mounted warriors the continent had ever seen. Historically seen as inconsequential, the early Comanche had been overshadowed by stronger tribes. However, after acquiring Mustangs in the late 1600s, their fortunes changed dramatically. The Comanche did not merely ride horses, they became masters of equestrian skills, setting themselves apart from most plains tribes by systematically breeding horses. This shift transformed horses into a form of currency and an emblem of their power. Their fully nomadic lifestyle endowed the Comanche with unmatched mobility, allowing them to traverse expansive distances, up to 400 miles, in any direction. This capability not only enhanced their buffalo hunting efforts, deepening their resource base, but it also made them formidable warriors. Comanche raids often struck under the illuminating light of the Comanche Moon, when the full glow highlighted the plains. Their sudden assaults on settlements were notorious for their brutality, which included murders, kidnappings, tortures, and rapid retreats. The Comanche's greatest battlefield advantage lay in their horsemanship. Unlike most tribes that dismounted to fight, the Comanche engaged their enemies while still mounted, expertly firing arrows with remarkable precision while balanced on the sides of their horses. The artist, George Catlin, noted that on foot they appeared unremarkable, but once on horseback, they became the most extraordinary horsemen he had ever witnessed. In contrast, the Apache primarily utilized horses for transportation and largely engaged in foot combat. Their agricultural lifestyle tethered them to specific locations. Author T.R. Fehrenbach astutely observed that it was this very taste for corn that killed them when their land was invaded by true savages on horseback. Though feared by the Spanish for their brutality, the Comanche's ferocity eclipsed that of the Apache. Their motivations extended beyond mere resource acquisition, particularly the pursuit of buffalo ranges. Deeply embedded in their psyche was the memory of being persecuted. Tales of their vengeful assaults became legendary. Historian Thomas Britton chronicled how the Comanche executed swift, devastating strikes against Apache settlements, aiming to kill warriors, capture women and children for the New Mexican slave market, plunder resources, and burn crops. Over time, they systematically drove the Apache out of the plains. By the 1720s, numerous Apache bands, such as the Pharaohs, Carlins, and Palomas, faced annihilation, with surviving members retreating to the arid mountains. The Lipan Apache were among the last remaining Apache on the plains. A significant Comanche invasion known as El Gran Sierra del Fierro in 1723 ravaged the Lipan, prompting them to join the Mescaleros and Jicarillas in their flight. Left without viable refuge, the Apache sought a new approach. In 1749, several Apache groups ventured into San Antonio, seeking peace. This unexpected overture shocked the Spanish, who had faced relentless Apache raids for decades. The Apache now requested not only peace, but also the establishment of a mission and presidio within their territory to facilitate their conversion to Christianity. To the Spanish, this proposal represented a potential turning point and end to Apache raids, while simultaneously expanding Catholic influence in the region. A mission site was designated at San Saba, and a wealthy Spanish benefactor pledged funds for construction on the condition that his brother, Father Alonso Giraldo de Terreros, lead the mission. In 1757, a contingent of 100 soldiers, several priests, and 2,000 animals arrived at the site. However, curiously, the Apache who had requested this mission were nowhere to be found. The mission and presidio were established approximately 2 miles apart. At times, Apache representatives would appear, soliciting gifts and promising to settle soon. Yet, as months passed without their arrival, suspicions began to mount. In March 1758, the startling truth emerged. San Saba was not Apache land. It was, in fact, Comanche territory. The Apache had cunningly lured the Spanish into common Korea, provoking a conflict with their adversaries. That spring, as the full moon illuminated the plains, all nearby Apache vanished. Spanish scouts reported seeing the hills alive with enemies, and over 60 horses mysteriously disappeared overnight. For nearly 2 weeks, Comanche forces observed their targets from a distance, biding their time. On March 16th, they launched their attack. Hundreds of Comanche and allied warriors approached both the mission and the presidio, adorned in majestic war regalia plumes, antlers, bison horns, with their faces painted in striking red and black. Many of them brandished muskets acquired through trade. At the mission, the Comanche pretended to be amicable. The priests opened the gates, welcoming the visitors. Once inside, however, the facada evaporated Comanche warriors quickly began their assault. Between 8 and 10 people, including Father Terreros, were slaughtered, and the mission soon engulfed in flames. The presidio, built significantly stronger, was never directly assaulted. The Comanche had achieved their purpose, a display of power. Afterward, they vanished as quickly as they came. In 1759, the Spanish dispatched a punitive expedition led by Ortiz de Perula. This campaign ended in catastrophe. Following the horrific misstep of killing friendly Tonkawa, they encountered overwhelming numbers of Comanche at the Red River. The Comanche vastly outnumbered the Spanish forces, leading to panic among native auxiliaries who fled the chaos. The Spanish retreated in disarray, leaving behind equipment and weaponry. The Apache's plan to ignite a war against the Comanche had ultimately failed. The Spanish proved equally incapable of withstanding the Comanche onslaught. By the late 1700s, Comanche raids penetrated deep into Spanish Texas. Their speed and mobility rendered traditional forts ineffective as protective barriers. Their merciless tactics terrorized settlements on the frontier. Historian Seguin described these assaults as total annihilations: villages burned, captives tortured, infants murdered, and young women and children abducted, followed by swift escapes across the plains. Repeated Spanish punitive expeditions suffered dismal failures. Some soldiers perished from exposure before even managing to confront Comanche bands. In desperation, the Spanish sought a new strategy. Turning to the very people who had orchestrated their earlier manipulation, the Apache, they devised a plan. Driven from the plains and unable to cultivate crops for sustenance, the Apache returned to raiding operations out of sheer necessity. In 1780, Governor Domingo Cabello expressed concerns that Texas would face complete destruction unless a significant change occurred. The Spanish began contemplating a war of extermination, yet they needed allies. Communication with the Comanche had been nearly impossible until Juan Bautista de Anza's expeditions revolutionized their approach. Anza's mounted tactics closely mirrored those of the Comanche. In a surprise raid near Greenhorn Peak, he decimated a Comanche band, following up with additional raids. He offered released captives a message that peace and trade were attainable. By 1785, after years of persistent pressure, Comanche leaders reluctantly agreed to convene in Taos. In a diplomatic triumph for Anza, he successfully persuaded them to negotiate as a unified front. The agreements reached were momentous: an end to attacks on Spanish settlements, establishment of trade relations, collaboration in the eradication of the Apache for the Spanish. This alliance marked a significant victory. Their most formidable adversaries had transitioned into their most powerful allies. For the Comanche, this collaboration was the key to finalizing their long-standing vendetta against the Apache with Spanish assistance. The alliance reached its zenith in 1790 when Spanish Comanche Wichita forces cornered hundreds of Lipan Apache in a canyon west of San Antonio. The ensuing slaughter was catastrophic, forcing the survivors into permanent retreat into the mountains. With this devastating campaign, the Plains Apache faced an irreparable demise. Comanche became firmly established and secured. For decades, a fragile peace prevailed between Spain and the Comanche. However, the mountain territories presented a different battlefield. There, the Apache could engage in their customary tactics, adaptive and impossible to fully conquer. In those unforgiving landscapes, the power of both Spanish and Comanche influence would eventually diminish. But those stories will await their own telling on another day.